Rita, you want to do the roll call?
Wait, we're not on all the way yet.
Okay, I always get going too quickly. When's your son? When's your son coming back?
Nobody's coming. You're going north, I guess.
Yeah. Nobody's coming?
There's plenty of solo couples here.
Was Mr. Roche away, do you think?
I think he might have gone.
I left a message, he wasn't answering, but I left him a message yesterday. I guess we're ready to go.
Okay. So we'll have a roll call, please.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
Here?
Mrs. Jones? Here. Mr. Kent?
Here.
Chairman Lyons?
Here.
Let the record show that the town attorney, Mr. Randolph, and the town manager, Mr. Thresher, are present. Mr. Dougherty is absent, as is the alternate, Mr. Roche.
Okay. On the minutes, we had the regular meeting and public hearing of 11/20/14. Do I have a motion? I don't know, any changes, revisions?
Of the 20th?
Yes.
I move it be accepted as presented.
Second?
Mr. Smith?
Yes?
Mrs. Jones? Yes. Mr. Kent?
Aye.
Chairman Lyons?
Yes. Rita, tell me, should we look at a comment on these special meeting minutes now?
Sure.
I have one change I'd like to make.
Where's that
No, I can find it myself. It was a comment I made, and I might have said it that way, but I didn't mean to say it that way, so I'm not quite sure how you handle it. You had,
Yeah, there's nothing there.
yeah.
What's the date of those minutes, for the record?
one? The December 8th.
It was regarding, it would be on the third page. Good morning.
Good morning.
We're going over the minutes from the special meeting we had. So the third page, the second from the bottom paragraph says Chairman Lyons observed this proposed solution accomplishes the following. The homeowner is put on notice as to what will be approved. It goes on saying what will unlikely be approved, and that they take the necessary risk. I certainly know I said they would be put on notice as to what might be approved, and they would take a risk by going beyond those parameters. I don't recall saying that it was unlikely it would be approved, so I'd like to strike that. What will unlikely be approved? Take that out.
All right, and insert what?
And just leave in, and they take the risk, the necessary risk. If they so just strike those words, and the rest is fine.
So what was approved?
Okay,
If they choose to push the items.
Okay?
got that?
Thank you.
Well, it's not quite a complete sentence though.
Oh,
So we just want to make it, I think, probably just a little grammar.
You know,
adjustment.
well, you just clean it up a little bit.
Yeah, that's,
We can do that.
I'm sure my grammar when I articulate something isn't very good either.
well, I think it was until we took out, I think.
And was there another, something else?
Yes, and then I just had on the minutes,
what page I have you with?
page 3 at the top, I made it easy. Second paragraph down, in the third line down in the middle. And as Attorney Randolph remarked that the ARPB has recommended that a waiver provision be inserted in the code he pointed out that there could be specific heights in the code, and if the applicant believed his design has certain elements that may make it acceptable, they could apply for a waiver. And I would say that heights and maybe provisions might be a word that you
I
might
don't
use.
remember what I said, but I could have said heights, because what we were trying to point out is that the code sets forth specific heights which are prohibited, discouraged, and preferred. So I might very well have said there could be very specific heights in the code, but that a waiver provision would allow a person without applying for a variance to get a waiver from those specific heights. So it may be right, Rita can listen to it, and if it's, but having read it now, it makes sense that I could have said heights.
Okay. Should we put something in there just to explain it more, just so somebody reading this would be?
Well, if Rita finds that there was something that explained it more in the minutes, she can.
She can't, okay.
But otherwise, these minutes have to reflect exactly what happened.
Okay.
You could, at this meeting, in these minutes, put something into, without changing these minutes, in the minutes of today, if you wanted to clarify something, you could do it.
Yeah. No, I'm fine with the wording, if that's,
Okay.
but it just, I mean,
Actually, I recall in that specific discussion, I recall you making a statement.
Yeah,
As
okay.
relates to the front entry.
Yes, okay.
Then I'll move the draft of the minutes be approved with the changes or recommendations that have been made.
so the only change would be the one that Chairman Lyons.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, okay, great.
Second. Mr. Dockery?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Kent? And Chairman Lyons?
Yes. So to Roman 4, any additions, withdrawals, deferrals, arrangement of agenda items?
No more.
Okay. Meeting dates, our next meeting's on January 22nd. You see these other dates, if anyone happens to know now that they can't make the January 22nd, it might be useful to alert Rita.
I think I'm looking good for those dates. I don't really.
I'm okay. Okay, great. Well, let's go to the public hearing application for development approval. Mr. Marsh.
That's where I'm in. Mark.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mark Marsh, Curtis Marsh for the record.
Call for ex parte communications. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any ex parte communications?
No.
No.
I drove by the building, the house site.
I'm here this morning representing Mr. and Mrs. J.R. Davis. Most of you will be familiar with this house on Old School Road. We actually did the house, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s, for Charlie and Ann Veely. And it was very much tailored around their lifestyle, which they were retired and basically empty nesters. The Davises bought the house recently, and it was an interesting negotiation, but it was successful. Yeah. If you've been to the house, basically, it's what I call a Casa Mediterranean. It's a very simple Mediterranean style.
What was the first word used?
Casa,
Oh,
which Mediterranean house, but it's very simple. Actually, Meisner did a lot of this in Boca, and that's what Old Floresta in that area, very simplistic, no ornamentation, just very simple, thicker walls, obviously the clay tile roof, and that's what really was the design here, or the original intent. The house is wrapped around like a U shape around a courtyard, pool courtyard. This is the garage wing, kitchen and the guest bedroom, and then just one great room linking the master suite. And this on the southeast corner was a 2-bedroom guest suite, which was detached from the main house. It is, there is a covered colonnade that wraps around, which links it. So the Davises, with a young family, have obviously identified some of the shortfalls on the current house. And what we're here today to request from you is there's a covered or an open patio here, which is very small. It's 8 feet. We want to extend that to 14 feet and cover it. Also, they'd like to bridge the this wing, the east wing, with an infill portion. Right now, it's an open barbecue area. Again, so that there's internal circulation to the house or to that wing for the kids, because the children will be residing there. There's no variance, no setbacks. It complies fully with everything. This is a plan. You may have had a chance to review it. This line here is the existing line, so we want to go out about 6 feet and create a colonnade covered. It will have retractable screening on these outer piers, which are automatic up and down. It's not a permanent screen enclosure. The infill here is basically to create a walkway, internal walkway, from the main house to this wing, and then it has a new bathroom and some new storage closets for the master suite. The roof is pretty simplistic. You'll see in a rendering shortly, the roof for the covered is going to be similar to what exists on the south side. It's a different angle than the main roof. This addition would be flat because, again, we don't want to compete. We want to just complement both. And again, the style does allow for a flat kind of adobe look. This is, if I can get this hand back. This is this east addition where the infill, and it's hard to see, maybe clearer on yours, that this is that flat roof bridging both the north and south wings of that east wing of the house. There is a chimney element, which was for the barbecue, which we were going to try to maintain because it does have, you'll see it from the front, a very nice element to the house. So we're going to try to maintain that. This is the new covered loggia on the north side, and this is what exists now. Sorry for the shadows, but there is a open patio here. So the idea here is to enclose this. So this is just a rendering to show the roof will match exactly, the colors obviously exactly, and these columns will be piers that will have the retractable screen that will retract into the head of that beam. I don't want to use the word entablature here. So that's basically it. It's very, very simplistic. It's mimicking what the style and obviously everything, character of the existing house. So I will answer any questions.
So that is representing 14 feet in that rendering?
Correct.
Okay.
They just need, there is no real living space,
None, yeah.
and it's a magnificent view, obviously, of the Little Club golf course. So.
I said, first of all, I want to say that I think that the house has always needed this because it just it looked very strange just having that blank wall with the 3 doors in it and the window. But I just have a question. You have the beam supported by the columns with the exposed rafter tails coming out.
Correct.
Or what is behind that? Is that just is that a solid roof surface or is it all?
It's all open rafters.
It's all open rafters, the whole way back to the house.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
They predominantly, if you've been there, their big timbers have been used in all the outside space, from the pergola coming in to the covered porch on the south side. So
I just didn't know if there was a solid roof material over it, if it was just all.
It's all going to be timbers.
Great. Yep. Just curious.
Mark, on the east elevation,
Mhm.
that section protrudes out.
Yeah, we've come out about 1.5 feet to interrupt again the linear effect of that whole wing. It's, you never see it, but, you know, consciously we want to try to interrupt that long. Now, when it was 2 pieces, it made sense, but,
Right, right.
and, you know, we wanted to get a little bit more room in interior. Because the master bath closet area is pretty limited for current lifestyles.
The new dressing area you built, I'm trying to understand their, you know, just ingress and egress and how they get through the hallway.
They come through here.
Yeah.
So this dressing room is for the master suite. This is an existing window, so that will become an arched opening.
An arched opening,
And then
okay.
you walk across here to this bedroom.
Right.
And there will be a pair of French doors here to mimic the existing French doors.
That lounge will probably be a playroom, or I don't know the age of it.
Yeah, it'll be what we call, it's actually a workspace for
Okay.
kids, you know.
Oh, right, computer, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I, just one, it's just in the plan, the roof plan, 831, and it's fine that it's whichever way it comes out, but it does show barrel tile covering the,
Oh, no, the surface of the roof is barrel tile. Underneath is
Oh, so
exposed.
it isn't-
brick.
it isn't
Oh, sorry,
ripped over.
sorry. I
Okay,
thought you
all
meant the underside of the roof, whether it was.
Oh, no, okay.
No,
yes.
no, sorry, I misunderstood.
Okay,
No, it's a hard roof with open timbers and wood paneling.
and barrel tile on top.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is the barrel tile matchable at that?
Yeah, it is because it's what we call an Alhambra, which is a handmade tile, and actually you can accelerate aging. Just takes buttermilk.
Buttermilk and the mold comes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you know, that's a question that the
Where do you get
Davises have.
buttermilk?
Pardon?
Bubbles.
Gallons of it. It's a question they may have to address in the near future about possibly re-roofing the whole house.
Is it an original roof?
It is an original roof. It's in good shape, but it's, you know, and it's aged the way we wanted it, so it's a little bit grungy. And
Right, of course. No, yeah,
so,
looks authentic.
Any other questions, comments?
No, it's a very attractive addition, I think.
Yeah.
In keeping with the style of the house.
A motion,
well,
please?
the color, by the way, is it's called Ballet White. It's OC9. If you want to write it down, read it. They're going to change it. They've actually started because they've been testing. The Vealies had a very pinkish hue, which is really not true Mediterranean. I mean, that pink. It's usually a biscuit color, which this is much more complementary to contrast to the roof.
They had more of the Oak Vertone Meissner.
Yeah, but it was
hotel
a
color,
pink.
that
It wasn't
yeah.
an orange or a
Yeah.
kind of a cream. It was pink. Charlie liked pink.
I'll make a motion. I make a motion to approve the level 2 architectural site plan based on a finding that the proposed addition of 638 square feet covered loggia on the north side and the enclosure of an open space on the east side consisting of 315 square feet, a total addition of 953 square feet to the existing Casa Mediterranean style one-story single-family dwelling meet the minimum intent of the design manual and applicable review standards.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes?
Mrs. Jones? Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Chairman Lyons?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I could, I've got to leave in about 8 minutes because I got a bit of an emergency. Could I just speak quickly to the entablature question? I don't know if this is the correct time. I see, obviously I wasn't here, but I did have my architect Hollis attend your last workshop meeting. And I see here, I was actually pointed to it by Skip, the new definition of entablature and in reference to height determination. I don't want to repeat what I said when I presented the last thing. I still think personally it's unfair to include the top of the entablature with the frieze or whatever as part of your highest point of roof. The entablature, and you'll see it in some of the illustrations actually that Marty has provided, it's no different, and I'm going to simplify this analogy, than the eave is supported at the highest point of the support point of a vertical wall. So to just use the analogy on the standard construction where we have masonry with poured columns and a tie beam, this is no different, except this is a much more classic ornament, but entablature is a support beam. It's not a decoration, it's a functional element. And it's no different than a tie beam, just simplifying it in a home. So I personally think it's a little bit dangerous to try to mandate or use the top of the entablature and its decorative elements as the top of the roof or the eave, whatever you want to call it here. I think unless, as mentioned and Skip, I commend you for allowing that waiver, because as we all know, it's hard to mandate architecture. You know, it's all in the beholder, the person that's created, the eyes of the beholder. But I think if there's a waiver option to what is in front of you as an application for an architectural solution that may have an entablature type element that may appear higher than what you prefer, I think it's up to the board to use that waiver option to allow, if it's proportionate and it's a good architectural solution. I think it's wrong to just mandate and inhibit, you know, good design. That's basically my stance for what it's worth. And again, all due respect to Marty, he's black and white. You know, and it's in the creative world, it's very difficult. It's not. He's a planner by profession, and I respect that. And that's a lot more, you know, definitive and black and white. But when you're dealing with design, it's a little bit more of a flex. It needs to be a little bit more flexible. And I'm not promoting, you know, two-story entablatures, you know, or columns. I think that's already taken care of. But I just fear that it's another reference point that is misused, and it could create some ambiguity. Because you'll see in some of these illustrations quite clearly that the entablature is a support beam. That's, you can go to Greece and anywhere else in the ancient world and see that was the element. That's how they succeeded. So I use the analogy of just our normal construction. You have a poured column and a tie beam, and the eave sits on top of that. So I know I may be the lone wolf here, but I'm pleading for some, not relief, but some respect to the fact that architecture, depending on how it's presented, should be, you know, not penalized. Something that seems appropriate.
Mark, let me respond to your comments, and I appreciate your comments. I think, and I'll ask the rest of the board if they agree with this comment, that the way you outline the intention of what you expect from the board, or how it's going to operate, it will operate with this guideline on the height, but in the event that homeowner wants to do something different from that standard, and the perfect right to use the waiver, and the waiver is intended to be a mechanism to allow for that flexibility. Sure. And that's how I'm viewing the waiver option. Mm-hmm. And also, we've discussed this in practical terms. The incremental fee is inconsequential to, you know, the total cost of a project, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna take any more time. Is that, please correct any of those comments from anybody.
What is the fee, Bill? We discussed it at the last meeting. It's nominal, I think.
Actually, I know you said it should be a lower price. I was holding off on discussions with that because I think that is critical to the concept. I could foresee that an applicant who has a variance application, as maybe determined by staff, would say, well, I'll just, we'd give them option to file for a variance, then we'd have to tell them, well, you could file for a waiver. To me, the two fees, and I think the fee for a variance is $1,000 or $1,500. To me, the waiver concept should be close to the cost of variance, so that there's not automatic encouragement to go to a lower fee waiver option. I don't know if I made sense there at all, but in other words, $1,500 for a variance or $200 for a waiver, I'll go for a waiver.
Well, but there's a distinct difference between a variance application and a waiver. I mean, a person will know when they come in whether they're applying for a waiver or variance. It's not gonna be discretionary on their part as to whether to file for a variance or a waiver, because we've defined waiver specifically. So if he comes in and has an entablature, he's not gonna apply for a variance for that, he's gonna apply for a waiver. And would there be, is the amount of work associated for applying for a waiver the same? And that's what you have to determine from an administrative standpoint, because the costs are just supposed to defer the cost of dealing with it.
In my opinion,
They're similar?
very similar, that's correct. Would you agree, Rita?
I assume that the same advertising would be required for a waiver as what's required for a variance? That's where a lot of the
And
expense
it's gotta
comes
go
in.
up to the commission, it doesn't, it's not at an ARPB level, so you have a full-blown application and advertisement.
Well, I do think that, in prior discussions, the concept of a waiver was to facilitate, further discussion on some of these architectural, features of a building that we can't quantify everything precisely in the context of the whole total building. And so I thought it was an option that wasn't necessarily attached to it a penalty for pursuing that option. Because now we've, in a sense, created a penalty by the fee, and I didn't frankly understand it that way. Shame on me, maybe I should have.
Can I just say something? Sorry. Well, would this fall into special exception category?
I think special exception is something where you have an existing
Okay, yeah,
wall.
I'm just
and
trying to
you know,
lessen the number of
yeah.
boxes.
No, I think we have to make this, I just want to point out that this house underneath the design manual could not be built because this eave is 18 feet, because it's a single-story house, it couldn't be built. And that doesn't make sense. What we're doing, I think, is we're discouraging fine architecture by trying to mandate, a lot of heights and things like this. If somebody wanted to do this, it's somewhat impossible by the fact that the code says that the eave height is 10 feet 6 inches for a one-story house. Here's an 18-foot eave on a single-story house. We've just killed a great design. And so I think that I feel very strongly that moving an entablature up or discussing an entablature shouldn't cost an applicant $1,000 or $1,200 or $1,500. I can see $200. It's one, it's just something that has to be, in my opinion, noted in the report that we have, somebody applying for a waiver. But I don't see how.
Yeah, a simple answer, sorry. A fee shouldn't be a discouragement to a good solution. It shouldn't be, the cost of $1,000 or $1,200, whatever it is.
Rita?
$200 is too low. I put more work into it
Are
than
you retired
$200 worth. Not yet.
And, you know, maybe what we thought was an artful solution isn't the right one, in hindsight. Because as a practical matter, a waiver does put this incremental burden on staff,
And the applicant.
and the applicant. Right, and then, you know, we have to look at it differently. We thought the waiver was going to facilitate more flexibility in terms of the architectural,
Well,
at least I thought.
And I would second
I'm going to have to depart, but I'll leave you talking money. I just want to, curiously, because Skip and I talk about this all the time, and I hate to use Palm Beach. In Palm Beach currently, right now, we have, you know, there must be what, 7, 8 variances per month requests?
Yeah.
At least. And to be honest, most of those variances, you've had them before you. Proving a hardship is very difficult, if not impossible. They will not, what you have, which I think is great, is a special exception, where you have some uniqueness by which you can make a case. So I think you've already set a standard. I mean, I wish, I've been telling Skip it will never happen, I don't think, in Palm Beach, but the fact that you had the foresight to allow for that flexibility through special exception has allowed things to be preserved and embellished and done in good taste. So I think the waiver is another good move on your part to allow for, you know, good solutions. So keep it up.
One last question. You raised the subject of the interpreter. Is the definition we're using technically incorrect?
No, I mean, he's gone to all the technical or the written definitions of an entablature. I'm just saying,
Okay, that's fine.
I just don't want it to be distorted because it is a post and beam construction. I mean, it is a support point for a roof element, whether it's decorative or functional, or flat or pitched. So it's still a bearing point, that's all. All right, great. Merry Christmas, everyone.
luck. Don't forget your phone.
I
Is that your
stole mine.
phone, Mark, is that your phone there?
Yes.
Oh.
I believe this. Cheers.
will you leave that for us, and I can return it later?
Sure.
I just want to make sure I get it.
Okay. Thanks.
Saved. Rita?
One thing that when you were talking about deciding between a variance and a waiver, I don't see that that's a problem, because with the variance, you have to prove hardship on 8 points.
Right.
So you would never, I don't think, apply for a variance because of the architectural appearance, because you would have no hardship with that. So the waiver would give you that difference.
Sure.
Plus, we're very specific about the sections of the code to which a waiver applies.
Yes,
So they're only going to be applying for a waiver in those specific instances.
Oh,
that's right.
And I don't necessarily think that your advertising requirements are going to be the same for a waiver that they would be for a variance.
Well, I
It could
would
just be-
imagine that
It could just be part of the notice to the public that usually goes out in regard to the meetings, which would say, this applicant has applied for a waiver from the entry requirements or something like that.
I would assume that the town could set whatever criteria for notification that you wanted to. But with the, we're very strong about letting the neighbors know exactly what was going on. So I would think that you would advise the neighbors the same as you would for a variance.
Yeah,
You think not?
yeah. But that's
And
the
that
notice that goes
$200
out.
is not enough. Now, I'm not saying that $1,000 is necessary, but it should be a little higher than,
Well, I'd also like to say, in hindsight, looking at this application, as it was presented to us, in my definition of an entablature, my understanding of an entablature. That application should have never advanced, because as it was a variance in height.
Which one?
Understanding. The last one that we
The-
just saw.
Big house
One
on the
south
south,
of the golf.
big tenant rough houses.
And so, the point of that is that indeed, where you have that situation of a variance and it can advance, it could advance with a waiver system. So, in essence, you provide them the opportunity and the flexibility for the application to advance. And based on our recommendation on sections of the code that would be looked at for a waiver, section 70-100 is included in those sections. So this particular discussion on heights and hip heights and such is in that area for, as presented and for recommendation, is included in the area for waiver options.
How long has it been $200?
Well, I don't think we have a
No,
fee
no.
established
And that
We
might
didn't
be a
have it.
whole,
for that.
Yeah.
that
Oh,
might be a
okay.
whole new discussion where we can actually go through and analyze what we think the times are at the time when we get to the commission. I don't know that we have to talk about fees here, I could be wrong, but the concept of trying to be close or lower or whatever, I think staff needs to really look at it more quantitatively as to what is involved in time, work, and effort to present a waiver to both the ARB and the commission.
Well, your point, Mr. Chairman, at the last meeting, you said it again today, in respect to the overall cost of a house, $1,000 application fee is not very significant. But on the same hand, you hate to put, I would hate to see the same kind of a fee for a variance where you have to come in and prove hardship, and a simple waiver where an architect can come in and just say, look how this fits in with the overall house. Seems to me there should be some difference.
Right.
Whether the fee's 500 or as opposed to 1,200 or what.
Yeah, and somebody, and Skip, it could also be somebody not building an entire house, it could be an addition, modification to the house, where it isn't, where it does become a more significant
Yes.
portion of the value of the house.
Right, yeah.
So that's,
But a waiver
or the
or a
value of the
variance
project.
still has to go to a level 3 review process. So, number of copies and distribution, deliveries, and so on is altered, whether it's a level 2 or not.
This project today is at level 2, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what about special exception? Your fee for special exception is the same as variance?
No,
No,
no.
What is it?
What,
I mean,
brought that in.
Yeah, I
It's
I
a
think
few
it's-
$100s less.
Yeah. But I guess what I'm saying is it would be appropriate to look at this rather than just, quantitatively look at this so that we justify our costs, because as you pointed out, this is not a revenue producer, this is a reimbursement of our cost
Break even.
concept, break even. And when we set our previous fees, actually go through and do some analytical work and estimates of time, money, cost, duplication, and everything, so that our true attempt is to match expenses to fees received. Do you agree with that, Rena?
Yes.
And to me, the art here is to balance the administrative cost of a waiver as opposed to, or against the burden on the homeowner to pursue a path of a waiver because we have a somewhat tight set of parameters that forces the homeowner way of dealing with this, we could simply broaden those parameters, but then we may get some outcomes we don't like. The board always has, and it's something that I want to discuss with Mr. Randolph to be sure that, as chairman, I am administering, in my role as chairman, the design manual properly. But ultimately, there's a context that this design manual was built, and it's clear that it has to be harmonious, it has to have appropriate architectural style, et cetera, that this board has the discretion and judgment to determine whether a particular building such as the one cited by Mr. Camp, you know, that we couldn't build Bealey's house today, but, you know, without going through waivers and so on. So I'm sort of struggling, frankly, with that. Because I do appreciate it takes more time, and in that sense, we should get reimbursed on financial time. On the other hand, we're really sending a message to the homeowner that if you don't follow these, I don't want to use the word rigid, standards, then you have another path, but it's going to cost you some dollars that may be viewed as punitive and, I don't know, I'll say unfair, that's not the right term, but it might be viewed punitive. So, I don't know what others think on this subject, but I think you have to look at the balance of the two. You can't just look at the administrative costs and say, I agree with your conclusion on the administrative, but now that has an implication to the whole waiver system as I was viewing it from the outset.
I think, I'm sorry, Keel,
No, I would second what Chairman Lyons said, is that it's a two-way street, and we're in a very delicate position here. You know, it's been said 1,000 times that you can't legislate good taste, and that's the problem. And I'm just wondering where in other words, we do have, based on what level a project is, there are various, whether we send out to all the homeowners within 200 feet of the property, et cetera. Maybe we can fit the waiver process in so that there isn't additional paperwork generated other than, you know, what's placed on the application.
well, obviously, as Bill says, you won't be able to determine that today without them getting back to you or the commission with the fees, but it seems to me you could come up with a conceptual recommendation today as a board to the commission, advising, if this is what you believe, that you believe that there should be some significant differentiation between applications for variances and applications for waivers. And that way, Bill and Rita could report back to the commission, unless you want that specific item to come back to you before you make that recommendation. But if conceptually you believe that it might discourage people from applying for a waiver if you have the same kind of a fee as you would in the event of a variance, I think you could make a recommendation that there be a difference in fee between the two, that's significant enough to not discourage the applicant from applying for a waiver.
That was my impression, that it wasn't gonna be the same fee. I think we're all caught a little off guard by that. So I was thinking maybe $200 isn't enough, but I certainly thought there should be a discrete difference between the two, maybe half or something like that. And part of the way we may justify it is that when Rita and Bill get together and decide just how much time and energy they would be on one versus the other. Okay? But I was always thinking that a waiver was going to be something lesser in cost than variance.
Maybe
And
variance,
I don't mean by $100.
maybe variance needs to go up.
Well,
I mean, I'm new to the thing, but I can tell you some of these big homes, the architectural fees alone can be up to $500,000, $1 million just for the bids.
what if you were just building an entrance? The only thing you're doing to your house is
Sure,
you're changing the entrance to your home as planned and plain, and you run into this.
And
It's
you
going to
wanted
be $1,500 in addition to any other costs.
Excellent point, yeah.
I think it could be a little too much, so, I don't think it should be a sliding scale, I just think it should be fair to the town, but also more reasonable to the applicant, so.
I think the argument could be made, falling in line with what you said about discretion, Mr. Chairman, that there would not be a lot of work on the part of staff in looking at this, because it's going to be your job to, using your discretion, to determine whether or not it fits in with the style of the house. I don't think Bill needs to sit down and make a determination as to whether or not he believes it fits in with the style of the house. I think it'd be a simple waiver, and it comes directly to you to make that determination without a great deal of review by staff.
I agree with that, and by the way, when I use the word discretion, I mean, obviously, I mean in discretion in the context of the manual.
Yes.
So how should we proceed? I think we're all on, Sylvia, Manny, do you have any?
I agree with what you said.
That's the fee thing. So should we in another meeting come back with a recommendation of the fee from Bill and Rita? Or do you want us to put forth what we think? I agree with you, I thought the waiver was there here, and we know they're coming with a waiver, and Bill's gonna tell us what, what fits the code, and then someone's gonna tell us what the difference is for the waiver, and I think on the spot, we're gonna decide, is this something we like enough to upstream to the town council or not? I don't see a lot of work by staff, because they're gonna do the same work, they're gonna tell us it's not conforming, but I don't think they're gonna do added work. Do you, Bill? You want?
No, I think there's more work than you think.
Okay.
Just talking, doing a staff report as to what I think is not at all what's involved
Okay.
exclusively. And in regards to how we advance this, ideally, we will conclude your review of codes today if you could make recommendations on these 3 items. So I think it makes a lot of sense to advance this, to get all of these to the next stage. Do you agree, Rita?
Yes.
And that Mr. Randolph has offered you what I thought was a good idea as to how you could advance it, that you recommend that there be a significant discrete difference between the fees between a variance and a waiver, and let it go from there at the commission level. And then that gives staff a whole lot more time to, I don't really want to start working on analysis of cost right now, the next 30 to 60 days.
Okay.
Right, fair enough.
But I could do it in the next 6 months, which I think might take that long to get through the code review at the commission level. So that's my recommendation.
Any,
I was just wondering, I mean, just Marty was in here at the, for the application for the house south of the golf course, to go over the establishment. But I don't know, at what point is the decision made to, and I don't know if the Urban Design Studio is under a contract or if they bill hourly, in other words, how their fee structure is, but involving him in this process, which is more of an architectural process rather than a development planning, which is the way I look more at Urban Design Studio. And certainly they've rendered opinion on various architectural elements, but I look at Urban Design Studio as more of a recommendation for overall building footprints, layout of streets, all that sort of thing. At what point where is the decision made to bring him in, which I imagine is fairly great expense. I mean, I'm sure he charges, upwards of $100 an hour for his work, and then being here. How do we do that?
I made that decision to call him in.
Okay.
I felt I needed a second opinion, and so I made that decision. In regards to our history here, you know that we have a great deal of history in code review, and Marty has been here to assist both the ARPB and the commission during that process. So this is not a new thing, particularly at code review. I think it's important to get different perspectives. He usually has a wider range of reviews, different cities, different towns, different municipalities, and to bring them in. For example, I think in your documentation from him on paper bricks and
Yes.
hardscape, he looked at approximately 6 or 8 communities and brought that data information back to you. So it's,
Well, I think that's where
this
he,
is nothing new, and he does have a great deal of history with our code, as well as other members of the firm. I mean, they do assist him when he needs assistance, so.
oh, I think that
This is-
what, I mean, for that sort of thing, for code review, all that sort of, he's integral to the entire process, but for an individual project.
Oh, I do that often.
But in other words, is that something that we should be doing and
Whenever-
creating the expense, or should we really be bringing it to the, bring it, you know, the entablature to the architecture review and planning board, and at that point, you know, if we can't come to some sort of thing, then enlist the help of Urban Design Studio in the project, but wait to get him involved until we clearly have something that you can't resolve, that we can't resolve, and, you know, because bringing him in to a specific project, I think is an expense that might not need to be, before the architecture review and planning board is involved in the project, might be something where we could certainly save some money. I don't know what his reviewing of an individual project costs on average, but it certainly is not an inconsequential expense.
There are times when you discuss with an applicant their desire or their agent and their desires, that there becomes the attitude that this is what I want. So as a tool for arbitration, litigation, whatever, I, as a technique, call in for a second opinion. And if that second opinion, can be Urban Design Kildare Studios or Mr. Randolph, depending on what it is. And once those experts give an opinion, and sometimes they agree with me, sometimes they do not agree with me, but I, obviously with Mr. Randolph, I go exactly what he says. And I give you Mr. Miner's written report that could be contrary to my recommendation. So it is, I think, it is my decision to call in help. When I first was hired, I was given that privilege. I made it clear at my interview that there would be times that I feel like I need assistance. At that time, and I know that's many years ago, and it can change.
Yeah.
I can take orders as good as anybody else, but at that time, the foresight was, let's get it right, and let's try to minimize the real arguments, disputes, and heated discussions. Even with those techniques, sometimes there are heated discussions. I don't know how else to put it.
I'm going to ask that we move on.
Perfect, yes.
Could we get to items by staff?
So can we report that there's a consensus in regard to how to approach this as far as your recommendation to the commission?
Yes, thank you. We need to make we need to convey to the town council our perspective on waivers, the fee on waivers.
Yes.
Okay. I think there's consensus that the architecture review board and planning board would like to see a significant material difference in the fee from variance, so that the applicant does not feel that there is a punitive fee for going beyond the use of waiver system, however that wants to be articulated.
I think that was articulated well. Then if you could just find out if that's the consensus of the board, then.
It is.
It's
Okay.
great, yeah. You bet.
Is it a motion, or do we just make a recommendation?
I'm fine with the consensus if Rita is.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
So items by staff, the code changes that we addressed at the special meeting. Mr. Bashir?
Yes, Mr. Minor has provided us a report of recommended code language changes. Section 7080, section 66-1, section 70-100. And I concur with Mr. Minor and recommend approval of this particular, recommend approval of this language change. Of these languages.
Questions, comments?
I would say that the only question, landscape, open space, I think I'm fine with that. Hardscape and 66-1, fine with that. Even roof heights, I think that, I'm fine with that. The only thing that Mr. Marsh brought up today is this, definition of entablature. And in the application that was in question, I'm not sure that I think we define entablature correctly. However, the way Mr. Randolph presented it as basically an entablature is a beam that's supported by columns, whether it has a filled-in wall in between or whatever, but just as a piece on top. Whether we could consider, certainly if an entablature went above an eave height, and the eave would, I would say, be the top of the entablature, where the rafters, where it supports the rafters for the roof. I don't know, because with a two-story element, certainly, with that being a two-story house, the entablature would have fit within the two-story eave definition. But certainly, for the one-story portion of a two-story house, it's just it's an interesting piece, and we can pass it as it is in here, past 66-1 in reference to entablatures. But I'm just wondering if we're restricting some piece of good design, or if we should just go ahead and push it through and let the waiver address. I don't know if it would be even a waiver, or if it would at that point be a variance.
So it would be a waiver
Yeah.
to do what we did a few meetings ago.
Okay, good, all right. Well then, let's go ahead.
And the waiver is less restrictive of the process, right? The variance is much more restrictive, right?
Right,
More
as far as-
expensive, yeah.
Well, as far as the requirements to get a variance, it's a lot more
Of course
difficult
it's,
than to get a waiver.
The hardship
Because
is
a waiver, you'll just look at it and make a determination as a group, whether you think it fits in with the overall scheme of the house and the neighborhood.
okay.
Yeah, I would like to see, because I think that the one-story portion of a two-story structure, that the entablature would have to fit into that, using the definition that Mr. Marsh brought today, that the waiver would have, that the entablature would have to fit within the one-story portion of a two-story house. But then, if the entablature is supporting a wall that goes up 2 stories, that might be different. So, anyway, I think the waiver process will ameliorate anything to do with that. So.
Yeah, and Mark seemed to be describing something different than what we've seen in this
He was.
graphic sketch. I didn't want to argue with him because he was in a hurry, but this clearly, unless this is from some wrong manual, describes the entablature as something to the very top of whatever the architectural feature was, and he was more addressing the lower beam or something. I didn't know what
If you remember his presentation
Uh-huh.
and his assistant, they were talking about cornices and all of these other
Mhm.
Right.
elements that were above the beam.
The beam.
So
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think there was.
That's why we want to put in, that's why I think this is the I think this definition is accurate in
I
here.
think this is.
I think
And I think this is, I think these are these
Yes,
coordinate
I
with
think
one
they are
another,
too.
and so I don't think.
They
we
are
should-
now.
Correct.
Okay.
And I believe that, my question to him before he left was the definition correct? And he said that mine had it technically correct.
Yes. Oh, no, I agree that this is what he was talking about today. Is this entire piece
Mhm.
is considered the support
Oh,
for
okay.
for the rafters. That's what I got from what he was saying today. But it's just whether or not this is supporting rafters or a two-story, a wall that's supporting a second story is the,
Well,
is where this would.
Are you okay with the way it is, or do you wanna?
Oh, no, I'm fine with the definition as is. Here, I think that's what he said today, it's
Oh,
correct,
okay,
yeah.
okay. All right, any other discussion? A motion, please?
Then I'll move we approve the revised recommendations or amendments to the code as presented in memorandum from Mr. Minor dated December 12th, 2014.
I'll second. Mr. Dougherty?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes?
Mrs. Jones? Yes. Mr. Kent?
Aye?
Chairman Lyons?
Yes. Okay, Roman numeral 8, assignment from town commission. I happen to attend that particular meeting. Before I go on, this may take certainly not more than 15 minutes and probably less. Is everybody okay?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Thrasher, why don't you give some context on this? And you've mentioned this before this board as well, that the 5% incentive wasn't working.
Right, we have, the language as it's written today allows for potential use of the FAR. And the question is whether this incentive could be reworded to achieve the purposes that you want, or whether the incentive section that was added be deleted. And it's my recommendation that it be
Well, can
deleted.
you explain why it's not working, or have you
Yeah.
previously?
I will give you an example. The whole center of it talks about, the whole center of my thoughts is in the last word in the second section, sentence of C1. It says any. And so we have a house under construction presently that has utilized the incentive, which gave them 5% additional FAR. 5%, because you know that the first 20,000 square foot of a effective lot, a person can build 20% of that in square footage. Above 20,000, the first 20,000 square foot of effective lot area, a person can build 33%, or 6,600 square feet. Above the 20,000, say a lot that's 30,000 square foot, that portion that's above 20,000 or the 10,000, our code will allow them a square footage of 20% of that which is above 20,000. This incentive, if met, would allow for an additional 5% or 25% of anything over 20,000. We have a situation that, and more than one, where the setback or step back of the building was accomplished through the connecting of a garage to the main structure. And the garage was set inward of the front lot line and beyond the front face of the main structure. And so it was argued that indeed there was a portion of the second story that was set back, but it was entirely in the garage. And what happens is that the main structure from side view, or perhaps even front view, looks more of a block formation than anything else. The articulation isn't in the main structure, and that's where you particularly want it, specifically want it. And so this has happened twice now, and it is, and both homes are from residential comments from residents are not liked.
Well, not in keeping with the current.
So I have, definite information or experience that in our community, this incentive language is actually defeating the purpose of its creation.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman? Bill, do you remember why we put it in the first instance? Did Marty think it would offer a better design?
Yes,
And it
yes,
does not.
actually it was discussed at ARPB and the commission level, and everybody thought this was a good language, that it will give us setbacks or step backs and articulation, and it would be, appear as though it was just from the side view, street side view particularly, you may know the house I'm talking about, it looks like a big block formation. It had no articulation at all. But yes, there was a great deal of time and discussion, and both ARPB and the commission, that this incentive concept could create a better architectural design.
Can you just add that it can't be, the garage is not part of the consideration? It has to be the main body of the home?
You could,
That's what we thought, and so I think anybody who was here, we were thinking you were gonna set back
yeah,
the second story of the front of a two-story home, and maybe, you know, a patio or whatever, which I thought would be a nice look.
yes.
But so they're doing it instead with the garage.
In
the
this,
second
in this
story of the
one
garage.
instance, I don't recall the other instance, what it was, the technique that they used. We know it's, I don't remember the first
Okay.
house. But that is an option, you change the wording or something if you think that, this would be helpful as it relates to creating more elements and articulation in the main structure. It just, something that needs to be considered and perhaps changed.
So if there are more than one resident that's spoken to you about it and
Yes.
thinks it should be something different, they're not liking the idea of it being over, with the second story over the garage? So
No,
Are they
not-
objecting to the
has-
flat face of the?
That's right, they're
Okay.
just talking about the main structure.
The flat
And then-
face of the main structure.
Yeah, yeah, and then others are
Should we-
stating that, you know, you give incentives, 5% additional FAR, that there's always somebody creative out there that could
Abuse.
abuse the situation. And the houses that we're talking about went through the entire review, they were level 3, they went from ARPB to the commission, and met the code, it looked right on paper, and
Was it the same architect by any chance?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
I would suggest that we may want to look at the subject in a bifurcated way, whether the concept of incentives in the first place is a good idea. In the context of our experience here, it's not been a good idea at all. We still get block buildings with more FAR.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, I'm thinking to myself, why do we grant more FAR? We don't need more FAR in the first place. So I'm generally biased towards repealing this or repealing it. At the same time, specifically as relates to the incentive, but I think we do need to have more thoughtful language on setback or step back, whatever is a better term, on the second floor, so it's not block-like. So I don't know whether we first have to decide whether we want to appeal this or repeal it. What's the correct word?
Well, in the language.
Repeal
Paul,
this
you know,
or modify it.
Or modify it.
It says, you know, the feature may take on the form of a porch or a balcony, but must be located on the front side of the structure, must occupy, all right, it says, so they're not, you know, it says on the front side of the structure, that's where we're having the problem. We all figured it would be the body of the home, I believe, and apparently it's not always being assumed that way.
And then it says any multi-portion, story portion.
Mhm.
I mean, that could be one articulation.
And there was some public comment,
Yeah.
for your
There were.
information, from one homeowner on Polo Drive who also had been a practicing attorney. He said, you know, his opinion was anybody creative is gonna figure out a way to wiggle through this and get their 5%. And, I don't know, it's hard to write all the right language to stop somebody from doing something. And I'm inclined to rethink this 5% incentive might have been pushing it in the wrong direction anyway.
Has it worked successfully on some others? I mean, we're only talking about the negative, or has it been?
No, this was created not too
It's
long
not that
ago,
old.
I think July,
Yeah, it's probably
it
nice.
was later than that, July 12th.
12,
So
2 years
13,
ago.
2012. But all I know is it hasn't worked successfully.
Mhm.
And the community is speaking out.
Oh, yeah, you've heard comments, I think you've heard comments on these homes, at least you've expressed them to me. I don't know, there's a house down here, and that was the house,
Yeah.
one of the houses.
One of
Well, they were on a corner too, which made it more difficult because you could see the side so much
Yeah.
better.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know, do we scrap it, or do we alter the language to make it be more,
well, we can always scrap it and come up with a new, scrap it and come up with a new plan that's more.
So that you know, zoning in progress was declared by the commission, meaning that while this is under study, no one can make an application under this particular provision.
Oh.
Yes, so,
That's interesting.
yeah,
so it's on hold no matter what?
right. There won't be any other mistakes made under this provision.
So in other words, there's no urgency to necessarily repeal it. So it needs some more discussion. So should we put it on the agenda for the next meeting?
Do that.
And what preparation should be done for that meeting?
Well, one, maybe we could, I don't know if you wanna point them out, I wouldn't
Yeah.
mind looking at the houses that they're
Excellent.
complaining about.
Right.
Could we get, is that breaking
Protocol?
I
protocol?
don't think so.
No, not if you individually do it, and you
Yeah.
don't discuss it with each
Right.
other
Yeah.
in between
Okay.
time. You come back here to discuss it.
Okay.
Then I move we table our discussion to the next meeting, but in the interim, it would be helpful if we could be provided with two or more examples of how it's possibly been.
Maximum of 2.
Two, okay.
Well, I'm second that, if that was a motion, I'm not sure.
It's a motion.
Okay.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones? Yes. Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Chairman Lyons?
Yes. Any items by board members?
Can I just make one recommendation in looking at this, is that we also look at the parts of the code which are more descriptive of the neighborhood and how houses should be built as far as two-story structures with massing central to the lots and things like that. There's a lot of language in the book already, and I don't know if it needs to be adopted as far as in a discouraged, recommended, prohibited type of structure, but we already have the language in that I think addresses the issues regarding how the massing of a two-story building and how it should be centered on lots, which would take it off the corners. It's already in the book, but I don't know if it has to be in a more, I don't know if it's okay if it's in the description of the community already, and if those standards can be applied to an applicant coming in for approval of a two-story house.
No, if I understand your question, the description of the community would not be the regulation. If you wanted a regulation which to talk about the house being centered on the lot, if that's what you're talking about, you'd have to look at that.
Yes, the
I'm
two-story.
not sure where you're going.
Well, I guess just the issue that I see is that in the description of the community and the desire for minimizing the impact of a two-story structure, that the second story be confined more to the central parts of the lot. In other words, not out to one side or the other or on a corner. And I think that would really go a long way towards addressing some of the concerns of the buildings the houses that have been built in particular.
Well, you'd have to work that into your regulations as opposed to the description of the community. You'd have to have something specific
Okay.
to advise the architect how you want the house to sit on the property.
There are some sections of the code that deal with the percentage of square footage on the second story.
Yes, but it's limited.
But they don't, that second story could move left or right or front or back, right, so which.
Yeah, they can move right out to the corners, to the ends of the lot, which presents,
Mr. Thrasher, do you think it would be good to embellish those sections?
Well, I've often thought that the percentage of second story is too low, or too high.
too high.
Mhm.
And that a minor adjustment, just to see what the effect is over time, might be a possibility. I don't know how to prove that, and so therefore not try to. But I think that, in my opinion, that would help if that percentage was changed.
So I think at the next meeting, we'll discuss this further, and we'll address two items. It would be the step back on the second floor, and the amount of square footage as a percentage of the first floor. Look at both those, because it's a two-dimensional issue. And any other considerations, but, you know, the and where the, the
two-story massing.
it means most of the building should be more central to the lot. So where most of that, what's articulate that?
What is the as far as the two-story massing, it has to be, I think we just have to have language that restricts the two-story portions. And this was, I mean, sort of on the agenda. I mean, Bill probably remembers, and Rita, you know, maybe 15 years ago, where we discussed in the areas of the town, of course, on the ocean front, and then the district in the south, where you have large lots. That doesn't really apply so much as to where you have houses that are much closer to each other, you know, 30 feet from each other, where you move the massing toward the middle, the two-story massing towards the middle of the property.
Normally your setbacks
Right.
take care of that issue.
Smaller lots.
You have greater setbacks for the second story than you would for
For
the
the first story. Yeah.
And then, I've never seen in any community that I've represented any language which says that the major portion of the house shall be centered on the lot. It always deals with the required setbacks.
Well, that's true. It's, yeah. But
Then you're taking away from the architect's ability to,
Yeah, then you're starting to deal with design again, I think.
Yeah, but it's just, it's to get the, well, I'm just thinking of, you know, the one house where all the two-story massing is on the corner, is a corner lot with the two-story massing, there's no step backs.
yeah.
I mean, it just goes straight up. And
so let's discuss this further, per Vice Chairman's motion, I think, to discuss it.
do we all be prepared for the next meeting to discuss it? Perfect.
Did we vote? Do we need to vote on that? Yes, we do.
Had it been moved, had it been seconded, yeah, I think so.
I think it had all been approved.
I think
It
it
has
has.
been.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It went through the mill.
Yeah.
Thanks,
And
Doug.
then you'll get us, call us with some addresses.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick.
Maybe I always know where they are, but.
No, I think I do, but I.
I guess there's no comments by the
Public,
public.
no public?
No.
Okay.
I know.
You did it.
Thank you. Lines?
Yeah, so I do that under items by board members.
Have a great Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Feel it?